Hi everyone, Krzysztof the Polish Geek, and welcome to another movie review. A review of the new Sam Raimi movie, because I do quite like Sam Raimi as director. Like, I wouldn't call any of his movies among my favorite movies of all time, although his Spider-Man trilogy could actually be considered among my favorite comic book superhero movies of all time. But whatever, I do like some of his movies, but I would never call any of them among my favorites. Like, I do like his Evil Dead trilogy, with my favorite being Army of Darkness, although Evil Dead 2 is also quite good, but for some reason I've always been more of a Army of Darkness guy. I don't really know why, but yeah, I do like Evil Dead 2 quite a lot too. But my favorite movies of Sam Raimi have always been his Spider-Man trilogy. Like, I really like his Spider-Man movies. And yes, I also like Spider-Man 3 too. I think it's very underrated and a really great conclusion to a really good Spider-Man trilogy. Yeah, I think Spider-Man 3 is very underrated, but I don't like all of his movies. And Drag Me to Hell, which is actually considered among best of his movies, among plenty of his fans, but yeah, I never really liked Drag Me to Hell. Like, it's a very unpleasant movie. Like, I don't understand the appeal, but whatever. Never really liked Drag Me to Hell. And his Marvel movie, Doctor Strange, Multiverse of Madness, like, yeah, I certainly didn't like that. Like, if you see my very old review of it, one of the first reviews I done on this channel, you'll see I'm saying I like the movie, but that has aged very, very badly, pretty quickly actually. The more I think about it, the more of it, because it was advertised as the first Marvel horror movie, but it wasn't really a horror, and all the creepy factors in it feel so artificial. Yeah, I said I liked Multiverse of Madness when I first watched it, but trust me, that has aged very, and I mean very, very badly. Like, again, they were advertising it something Lovecraftian, but what we got was another generic superhero Marvel movie with, I guess, some artificially creepy scenes. That's pretty much it, but going way too much on a tangent now about Sam Raimi and his general work, so let's get to his newest movie, which is Send Help. And what did I think of this movie? Well, until the end, and the end was so stupid, like one of the worst endings I've ever seen, but we'll get to it later. But until the ending, I thought it was a quite entertaining, although pretty cheesy, but quite entertaining, basically, survival on an island movie. Kind of like Castaway, as if it was a jerky boss and his female employee, basically. Kind of like, again, in the style of the movie Castaway. And Castaway, I remember, I did see this movie many years ago, and I quite liked it actually, but haven't seen it in many, and I mean many years, but that's the best way to describe Send Help. Again, this woman, I think her name was Linda, and her really jerky and bossy boss, and played pretty well actually by Rachel McAdams and Dylan O'Brien. Actually, both actors give really wonderful performances, but yes, Linda and her boss, who's a real jerk, they both end up stranded on an island, and then kind of the roles switch, because although in the office he's the boss, but then they get both stranded in the island, and because she wanted to play in their survival, in this reality TV Survivor, as a result, the roles kind of switching, and she has some experience with survival while he has none, even though it's pretty obvious that he still very much wants to be her boss and still acts like her boss, like, "You're fired," and all that. Kind of predictable actually, but as she points out to him, roles changed, so now they're no longer in the office. And at first this all stuff is actually quite interesting and entertaining. Like, the chemistry, the dynamic between two characters is kind of hilarious and pretty well done, and I kind of like that actually. It's all pretty interesting, and again, both actors give a really wonderful performance, and basically seeing Linda using all those ways to survive and cooking some food on the island, and the food actually does look pretty tasty. I will also give a credit to that. This is all pretty interesting, but then towards the last act, it's where it gets stupid, because then it feels like it was all done for the sake of shock value. Like, as I said, this is one of those endings that single-handedly is able to ruin the whole movie for him, because it's basically like done nothing but for the sake of shock value, and this is basically like, what? Yep. But even without the ending, it's certainly not the type of movie I'll be rewatching anyway. This is like again, and now we're talking without the ending, like before we get to the ending. Before we got to the ending, I was pretty entertained and invested and interested where this is going, but from the beginning I didn't think it was the type of movie that I would ever be rewatching again, because again, it was a really fun survival on an island movie, but at the end of the day, it was not the type of movie that I would find myself rewatching particularly much. And there were also sort of several moments where it was pretty obviously Sam Raimi, like whenever Linda would go hunting and hunt a wild boar, and there was lots of blood and gore, and that was very recognizably Sam Raimi. But now another major issue with the movie. This wild boar looks so artificial. It was pretty obviously CGI. Like there was very little CGI on this movie. It was mostly used on those wild animals that Linda was hunting, but it was so obviously CGI, and yeah, I didn't like that either. Like if you have so little CGI to use in the movie, why can't you do a good job with it? But still, overall, the best way I would describe Send Help is that throughout most of the movie is basically this cheesy but pretty entertaining and interesting survival on an island movie. And again, the dynamic between two characters is pretty good and interesting, and they do have a very good chemistry. But then it feels like basically with the ending they just decided to go full for the sake of shock value. We are gonna just basically give you something you don't expect, even though it completely makes zero sense in the story, and at the end of the day you just end up hating all the characters, and it's just hard to ever be rewatching now this again, because you just end up hating all the characters and you completely would not be invested and interested in what happens to them, because you initially throughout the movie are, and you're interested where this is going and all, and like if it ended as I initially predicted it would end, well, about the characters basically making up and becoming friends and all, well, some would call it basically cliche and predictable, but sometimes it's better to write something cliche and predictable if it makes perfect sense in the story than to just basically write a stupid, ridiculous ending just for the sake of shock value. And this is very much what I found in this movie, Send Help. So overall, will I say it was a good movie? No, absolutely not. Yes, again, as I keep repeating, I was pretty entertained throughout the first two acts of the movie and pretty much invested in the characters, even though it's not something I would ever be rewatching again. But then the last act is like one of the most ridiculous and completely not fitting with the rest of what happened I ever seen. So, unfortunately, it's a miss from Sam Raimi, which is a shame, because it's one of those directors that whenever I'm going to see the movie, I do see a potential at least, but that's certainly not one of them. This is very much a miss from Sam Raimi. So, thank you all of you for checking out this review. Press the like button, please subscribe to this channel, and I will talk to you soon in another video. Talk to you then, bye!